Like many films in 2020, Emperor was slated to come out late March, and then quarantine happened, and all of the release dates got switched. This biopic is finally making its way to digital, but is it worth the wait? An escaped slave named Shields Emperor Green makes his way north towards freedom. He ends up taking part in the raid on Harper's Ferry, which is one of the events that leads to the Civil War. This movie is taking the perspective from more of the legend side of the story versus true historical accounts. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we get to focus on the man in a hopefully interesting and engaging way. Now, for the most part, this film looked good. I mean, the swamps, the plantations, all of the back roads, they felt real. They looked real. They felt oppressive and dark, and just someplace that you wouldn't want to be, especially if you're on the run. The filmmakers use the fade to black transition a lot, and I'm not a huge fan of that because a lot of the time it just feels lazy. Sparingly, it's okay and it has its usefulness, but when it's done multiple times in a movie, it really then feels like the writers didn't know how to transition from a scene to another scene. So what do? Well, you just fade to black. I mean, hey, maybe the writers of this were TV writers and they were used to commercial breaks. Even with those annoying transitions, I was still enjoying learning about Shields, but I wanted more depth to who he was and what they were telling us in the story. I wanted to see how he struggled growing up. I wanted to find out how did he attain the position that he held while he was enslaved at the plantation? And how did he build the relationships that he had? I mean, all of these go into the character, to the man that we get to see, and they shape his actions, his decisions, his motivations. Every bit of that comes into play there. This movie is only an hour and 39 minutes long, and really it could have used at least 20 minutes more to tell a richer story. As it stands, it felt more like a Cliff's Notes version of Shields Green. I mean, even if we're only seeing and learning about this small period within his life, there was so much that they touched upon and they hinted at in this that they could have built upon it and really made it engaging. I think the filmmakers might have been worried that we as an audience would get bored with a biopic. As we're learning about who this man is, that we couldn't handle some downtime as we just watch his struggle, as we watch his journey, as he goes about the treacherous journey from the south to the north as he's trying to escape towards freedom. So what do instead? They add in explosions and gunfights and horse chases, and all that does is serve as a distraction from what the story could be, but it also takes our focus away from who Shields is. I think a lot of this stems from the fact that this is the director's first feature-length film. He's also the co-writer, and just the overall lack of experience is what is shining through the most in this movie, and it ultimately is detrimental to the overall story and presentation. Unfortunately, the story feels like a whole lot of micro thoughts smashed together to try and tell us a story. And because Shields is moving locations, it feels like there's actual motion in the script. But there's not really. I mean, we have some interactions that are just kind of bizarre. I mean, Shields interacts with a bank robber, and that's where part of the explosions and the gunfights and the horse chases come into play. But ultimately, that doesn't lead anywhere. He also has a conversation and moment with another slave as he's on the run, and that doesn't serve any purpose either, other than maybe to show the motivations of people. The acting by the cast is good, but ultimately they're all hampered by the unengaging storytelling, so nobody really gets to shine. Dayo Okeniyi plays Shields, and he's great to watch. I mean, he was charismatic. I liked watching him. You could see his eyes, his mannerism, his body language even, just the oppression that he is feeling and just the weight on his shoulders. But he's not given much to do. I mean, like I said, he's given all of these little spurts that are then slammed together that are trying to make up a cohesive story. Even the raid on Harper's Ferry is stunted. I mean, it might only get 5 or 7 minutes worth of screen time as well. I really think this movie had a great opportunity to shine light on a historical figure and to really tell his story in a great and engaging way. I didn't know anything about him, so I was looking forward to really getting a good story, to something where I could understand who this person was and what his contribution to the world was. Even if it's based on legend, I'm okay with that because legend is typically based on some truth. But in this, the legend is even lost. There's nothing great about any of the presentation other than the acting, and again, they're hampered by the storytelling. What should be something that is very inspiring and just awesome to watch becomes very forgettable and almost regrettable for having to watch it. I hope at some point that somebody else will pick up the mantle of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Emperor Green and really tell his story in a way that he deserves, so that we as a people can get to know who he was and to really see what he contributed to the world. I think in the hands of a better writer, that the story can be more engaging, more intriguing, and ultimately more memorable. There's no sex or nudity, some profanity, and a lot of violence. I give Emperor 2 out of 5 couches. What's a good biopic to check out? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.